yeah, a lot of grandkids.
My dad was a Democrat and my grandfather, and so forth, and so we just were all Democrats. He worked hard to get a Secretary of State. He was on the road constantly. Nothing was given to him. He had a fair chance, and he worked for everything that he's done. He's done a lot of things that helps, I think, that helps the general public. He was determined to do his best.
I'd like to tell you about my plan for the November election. But first, I want to tell you about my grandfather, Gene Adams. In case you've ever wondered what the G in my name stands for, I'm named after him. He's always been my role model. He's a man of the highest personal integrity. When I make decisions, I think about what Jesus would do, and if I don't know, I think about what Gene Adams would do. My grandfather is 87 years old. Both my grandmothers are still alive, one 85, one 84. They vote every election. I want them to vote this year, but I also want to keep them safe and enjoy more years with them. My grandfather told you I grew up in a family of Democrats. That's true. Until I was in my 20s, I was the only Republican. Starting as a teenager, before I was old enough to vote, I was working to help elect Republican candidates. In my home county, that was 88% registered Democrat. I've worked for probably 400 Republican candidates as a volunteer, a staffer, and ultimately an attorney for Vice President Pence, for the Republican governors, for the Republican attorneys general, and many others. I'll always be a loyal Republican. But now I don't work for the candidates. I work for the voters. The election plan for November puts voters first. Kentucky drew national praise for being the state best at conducting an election during this year's pandemic. I'm proud that with Kentucky at the bottom in so many areas, today Kentucky is number one in something, elections. But a record is not something to stand on, it's something to build on. And here is what's changed since the primary. First, we're scaling back absentee voting while protecting it for those who need it. If you're concerned about the risks of voting in person because of your age or your health condition, this plan lets you vote safely at home instead of being disenfranchised by a virus. But to protect this right, we cannot overload the postal system. This fall, the vast majority of voters will vote in person, but those who should not will not have to. Second, we're making in-person voting more available. For the primary, most of our poll workers canceled on us, and we had fewer locations for in-person voting. This time, we're offering 3 weeks of early in-person voting, and then on Election Day, opening back up many of our usual precincts. My office set up a portal at govoteky.com to register volunteers to serve as poll workers. Some counties have already told me they expect to have every precinct back open for Election Day. Stay tuned, and we'll have more information soon about where you can vote in person. Third, we're going to have election results on election night. Usually, Kentucky is the first state to report its results for president, and I think that will be true this year. Although we won't have final results election night, the vast majority of votes will be counted and reported. Something else that's new for this election, photo ID to vote. Photo ID is what I ran on, won on, helped write, helped pass again over the governor's veto, and personally signed into law over the governor's veto. The final step was to successfully defend photo ID in court, which I've done. Now it is the law of the land. I was sued by the ACLU and other left-wing groups who tried to strike down photo ID to vote for this year's election. I fought back and won. I used my emergency powers to make 2 small, temporary changes to the photo ID law so no liberal judge would strike it down. First, the photo ID law already exempts various categories of people who can't get a photo ID. I added voters who can't get a photo ID because of COVID-19. Those voters will still need another approved form of ID to vote, and they'll have to sign an oath that goes to the grand jury. Second, voters who have a photo ID but due to COVID-19 cannot produce a photocopy of it, along with a written application for an absentee ballot, are now exempted from that requirement. The absentee ballot request portal at govoteky.com, however, makes these written applications unnecessary, and the portal is linked to Kentucky's driver's license database for purposes of ID verification. So we will still have photo ID proof of nearly every voter in this election. Put simply, all this means, I've made it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Here's what this plan is not. Vote by mail the way they do on the West Coast. We aren't registering voters without their consent and mailing out ballots they didn't ask for. In fact, President Trump supports how Kentucky is handling its election. President Trump has said repeatedly that absentee ballots are good, and he votes by absentee ballot. Today, America and our faith in and love for it are under attack. When I see our brave men and women in uniform defending our country and defending the freedom of people who despise the military and even despise our country, it reinforces to me that my job is to defend everyone's right to vote, to have their say in our democracy, whether I like what they have to say or not. My job is to protect your right to vote and everyone else's too. When I have to make a big decision, I look to my faith. If I made decisions based on politics or what would be best for myself, I would be unworthy of this office. My grandfather taught me better than that. Every day I do my best to make him proud and to keep you from regretting your choice, to pass over a candidate you knew and loved to put me in this position instead. Thank you for the honor to serve you, and please stay tuned for more updates on our election.